Hi everyone, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I'm sharing with you the books and resources we're using for our Ancient Persia main lesson block. We are using our Waldorf curriculum. This is by Live Education. We are doing a main lesson block, but I do have some other resources that you can use in order to create your own unit study or create your own main lesson block inspired by a Waldorf approach. We're also using our main lesson books. These are from Live Education. I'm just going to go all the way to the back here and just show you that the covers are really lovely for these main lesson books. They are 12 inches by 9 inches and they come in landscape and portrait, but I prefer the portrait style, especially for the upper grades because it mimics a notebook a little bit more. And so we will use these pages to do both our drawing and our writing. It also has onion skin pages in between so that you're not damaging your work. So for these lessons, we've been doing some chalk pastels as our drawing medium, and since we started that in the book, we ended up doing it for, like, I intend to do it for all of our ancients. Now this book does include ancient India, Persia, Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece. However, we're not going to be able to fit all of them into this main lesson book since we've already hit the midpoint and we've only done ancient India. So we will need some more main lesson books in order to finish all of the ancients, but we are doing somewhat of an abridged approach to these lessons, so they're not quite as full as we typically do our unit studies and main lesson blocks. We're also using our Sargent Art square chalk pastels. I really like these because they give a nice vibrant color. These are not looking so great now because we've been using them for a while. These are the same chalks that I use on our chalkboard, and I do prefer these as opposed to pastels for work on paper because they do blend well. They're a little bit easier to use. They are still really messy, and so I have been using gloves when we are working with our main lesson book, although that's probably not super authentic when you're working with chalks. You probably want to use your fingers in order to blend them, but it gets all over the place. Also, we are using a matte fixative to spray on our work so that it doesn't smear, and it does a pretty good job. There's not much that you can see coming off on my finger, probably nothing at all, versus if this wasn't fixed, it would be coming off on your fingers completely. It would be smearing every time you touch it. Thankfully, there are the pages in between these onion skin pages that would protect your work, but it would be getting all over everything. We're also doing our writing on the one side. These are unlined pages, and you could incorporate your own lines by drawing them in if you'd like. I prefer not having the lines for a few different reasons. My daughter does prefer having the lines, so she is drawing them into her main lesson book. We are working out of a main lesson book together, so she has hers and I have mine, rather than me doing all of these drawings on a chalkboard or doing one chalk drawing for the entire unit. I am working alongside with her. I'm even doing narrations alongside with her in case she chooses to do copy work or dictation versus coming up with her own narration. So narrations differ a little bit, in my opinion, from a summary, because for me, a narration is anything that my student is going to in some ways regurgitate, which isn't a really great way to describe how a student processes the information, versus a summary. It would be, a summary for me is more an overview of everything that was discussed or talked about or read or that you orally presented from, start, middle, and end. It has sequence, and it kind of hits all of the points of whatever you are describing in a summary, versus a narration. It may not be as complete as a summary, but it is what the students are coming up with. So that is generally how we do work for our main lesson. We don't have worksheets, and we don't really have, like, say, a question answer approach. We do have oral review, we have written narration, and we have an illustration primarily for all of our work. When I'm approaching a history unit, I do look for certain categories of books to enhance our unit, but this is completely optional. If you were already following a Waldorf approach and you're already using a curriculum, these things are just extras, and in some cases they may derail the approach or dilute it in some way. So it's not always a good thing to add more books or to add books in the first place or other resources or projects to a main lesson block, because there's a very specific approach to a main lesson block. So one thing that I absolutely love to add to our history units, and I really don't see a downside to this, is cooking recipes of the area or the historic recipes. At one point we did get a historic recipe book, a cookbook for medieval Europe, and we practiced some historical recipes, which was quite interesting. But I am completely fine using modern day recipes for whatever region that we're studying. So Iranian food is one of my most favorite foods ever, and I have learned many recipes from friends, and so I do want to share with you a few cookbooks. I did kind of get excited, and I have 4 cookbooks to share with you. They're all from the library, and I want to share the one that I'm actually going to end up purchasing because it looks the most inspiring to me. So the first one is Pomegranates and Roses, and this one has some beautiful photography, some beautiful images of the recipes, and of course the recipes itself. And what I noticed with the books that I happened to pick out, a lot of them seem to be written by home chefs or home cooks who are bringing in their version, like their family versions of popular Persian dishes or Iranian dishes. And so I like the personal feel that these particular cookbooks impart. So you will find stories throughout them. The next one is the New Persian Cookbook, and this one has, again, similar approach with the pictures of the recipes as well as the content itself. Beautiful. You wouldn't this would still be a great option, but it's not my favorite one. So I don't have too much to say about these, except that for me, I've always enjoyed the cookbooks that have really beautiful photography of the recipes. However, of all of the cookbooks that we've ever gotten for any of our history units, the one that ended up being the best for our family was one that had pretty much had zero photography and had a few black and white photographs that were of like landscape, because it was on the Silk Road, so it covered many different regions, but it only had the text for the recipes. And I found that I ended up evaluating a recipe based on the ingredients and the recipe itself rather than the image. And when I have a cookbook that has images, I end up evaluating what I intend to make based on the photography. And sometimes you miss out on some really great recipes because you're just looking at the pictures. So just wanted to put that out there. Okay, bottom of the pot. This is my second favorite one, and this is definitely one that I want to make some recipes from, but still holding out for my favorite one here. But again, beautiful, inspiring photographs. And one thing that I'm lucky to have is an Iranian Persian store near our home, so that we can get some of these particular ingredients that you may not find in other places. For instance, in this one has barberries, and those are a little bit hard to find in my opinion. I've only mostly just seen them at Iranian stores. Some of the other things you may have an easier time finding, like basmati rice or pistachios in this case, or saffron, which is a pricey addition, so a little goes a long way. But barberries I find are in some of my favorite recipes for Iranian cooking, and it really has a unique kind of citrusy but tart, more of a tart taste that I don't think I've tasted something similar in other dried fruit. So definitely, if you have the option to get some of these very specific ingredients, you'll really be able to taste something that's uniquely Iranian. Okay, so my favorite cookbook so far is the Saffron Tales. Now I should say that we are putting this unit together, so we've only just started this unit, and so all of the Iranian recipes that I've made are ones that I've gotten from friends it is their own recipe, their own family recipe, or they've gotten it from their mother, which is just awesome for me because it really feels authentic in the sense that this is something that families have been making, I imagine, for generations. But this is the book that was most inspiring to me based on the layout, based on the photographs, and already we've tagged a number of pages for the recipes that we want to try. Now, since we haven't used any of the cookbooks yet, this is me presenting our work. This is not a review video. We tend to do those at the end of our unit. And if we may not do that for this unit, just want to forewarn you. So I can't really evaluate each of these resources except for the ones that we've used or used a little bit. And so while I'm saying this is my favorite one so far, and this is one that I would like to include in our own home library of cookbooks, I have to say that I haven't actually used any of them yet, but these ones are definitely, or this one is definitely one that we're going to be using. This is a book that we're not going to use. I picked this one up from the library. It's called Forgotten Empire, The World of Ancient Persia, and I am not using it because it's not going to suit our needs, but I did want to show it to you in case this is something that you're looking for. It has a lot of images of artifacts and a lot of content and details historically, but this is not quite what we're going to need. If you're really into this time period or this culture and you needed background information to present lessons, I think this would give you a really great foundation for understanding the history behind some of the more simple books that I'm going to show you. But at this point, for the lessons we're going to do and the more abridged version, I'm not going to end up using a book like this. All right, so other books that I really look for when we're doing a history unit are picture books. I love including picture books because I think they're a great opening activity. They're a way to bring multiple age groups together. At this point, I'm down to just homeschooling my youngest child, but I still include the picture books, although it's honestly a little bit awkward reading a picture book together because she is so much older. But when my children were younger, so she's almost 13. So when my children were, 4, 8, 12, 16, and my 16-year-old, the oldest, I've only ever homeschooled really 3 at a time. Then when you have a 4 and an 8 and a 12-year-old, or, your children might be closer in age, what I like about picture books is that they appeal to a wide variety of ages. Now, these picture books are written at a higher level. You may think, oh, this picture book is for a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, but they're actually written to appeal to a wider age range, in my opinion. And so the older children as an adult, I get so much out of picture books because it's a great introduction to a topic area or a historical period, or it's the highlights or a more simplified version. So I really, really like picture books quite a bit. I think authors do a really great job presenting material. And then of course there are the illustrations, which are really enjoyable as well. So this one is called Queen Esther. And I did notice some historical inaccuracy in the book that I wanted to mention. I think I might have written it. So Queen Esther is from 478 BC, and Hanukkah was established 200 BC. So they have the Hanukkah candles, unless the candles predate the tradition of Hanukkah, they are included here. So that is not historically accurate, since this Hanukkah wasn't established for another 150-ish years after Queen Esther. So just wanted to mention that there was that inaccuracy, but if there's something else with the candles that's different, then of course let me know. This story works really well for our ancient Persian unit, even though the time period might not exactly overlap with the some of the not the mythologies, but like the creation stories of like the Zoroastrian religion and that part of ancient Persian culture. But I still wanted to include some of these picture books because I do feel like they will enhance our units. So this one's called The Phoenix of Persia, and I just wanted to give you a look. We haven't read this one yet, and it just looks exciting. Sometimes I pick picture books because of the illustrations. Okay, something else that I look for when we're doing a unit, especially a historical unit versus like say a science unit, is to include some of those other subject areas into our unit. So since we're doing a history unit, including science is a great way just to make this unit a little bit more hands-on or a little bit more full and interesting. And again, if I were doing a science unit, for instance, I might include biographies, which would include some history, some scientists of the past or whatnot, just to kind of round out the unit. So this one's called Ancient Science, and only one chapter really relates to the ancient world. Since we're doing multiple ancient civilizations, so far only one chapter is working. So this is Science from the Dawn of Time, and this one would include a couple of projects that we could do. And then Ancient Mesopotamia, actually that's a unit that's going to follow. And then we do have Ancient Egypt in here as well. And then let's see if I think there should be Ancient Greece possibly. Yep, Ancient Greece. So this book, so far, we've only planned out 2, and then here we go, Ancient Rome. So we've only planned out 2 projects to do. One is a botany project that we might save for a little bit more into spring, because of our location. And then the Sweet Tooth one, this one was one that we planned to do with our Ancient India unit, but we're going to modify it to include Ancient Persia as well. So we're going to make rock candy with sugar, but we're going to flavor it with Persian inspired flavors. So, or at least we're going to use saffron and cardamom. So we'll see how that works out, but that is what we're going to do with this book. World Tales for Family Storytelling, Volume 3. This one has several stories of different parts of the world, I'm kind of thinking of them as fables. So we've already done the ones for Ancient India because that's the unit that we started with. And now that we're on to Ancient Persia, we're going to read the ones on Iran, and we've already read a couple of them. These stories are really short. They usually impart some kind of lesson, and we include them in our opening activities. So something religious that we're bringing in is the story, the biography of a companion of the Prophet, may peace and blessings be upon him. And this one is for Salman al-Farsi. And Salman al-Farsi was a Persian who was a Zoroastrian, and then a Christian, and then a Muslim. And so we're going to include his story, even though the time periods don't match. For us, it is a relevant story. Something else for our history units that I like to include are historical fiction. So I found these 2. This is Arash the Archer, and this is a really simple, in my opinion, chapter book that I don't think would take a student too long to read. But again, because my child is older, I'm not doing as many communal read alouds with all of my kids, but this would be a book that I would consider reading aloud with all of my kids, because my 4-year-old would not be able to read this, and my 8-year-old wouldn't be reading this, but my 12-year-old would. And if that 12-year-old is reading it on his or her own, then no one else would be benefiting. And historical fiction, it can be debatable whether it's a benefit or not. I personally like historical fiction, but I have run into some historical fiction that I felt were not they were not an asset, because they ended up, in my opinion, confusing the actual history with the fiction history. So something like this, I feel like would be okay because it seems pretty benign. And this would be something that I would otherwise consider reading together as a group. But right now I'm assigning this one to my daughter. Shadow Spinner is another historical fiction. This one for me seems more like middle school reading level, and this will be something that she will read on her own. When I assign historical fiction, we may talk about it. She may do an oral review of it, but I'm not assigning any work at all. There's no journaling to go with it. It's just enjoyment that is part of the lesson, and instead of just reading any fiction, it's something that can relate to our lessons. So far, this has been one of the best books for this unit. It's called The Ancient Persians, and what I love about this book is that if you decide to do your unit more as a Waldorf approach, I think this would be the single most important book that you could use. The reason why I like it is because part 1 tells you the history or the facts about the land and aspects about the religion, Zoroastrianism, and just more of the factual, geographical, historical things. But the second half of the book, which is actually more lengthy than the first half, let's see what page it starts on. Page 31. This, and for the remainder of the book, are all of the stories, the mythologies, the creation story, and this is really a big part of teaching ancient civilizations from the Waldorf approach, is that the primary way of teaching these ancient civilizations is through the stories and the religion and the beliefs and the creation story and the learned men who like I want to say the people that they consider divine, I suppose is an appropriate way to describe some of the people who are important within that civilization and the religious beginnings. And so this particular book, we've only read a little bit of the beginning and a little bit of so we've only read one part in part 1 and one part in part 2. So I haven't finished this book to tell you know, any other pros and cons, but upon reading what I did read, I felt like this was a really great way to approach this ancient culture. Okay, the last couple of books are more like, I don't want to call them completely dry, but they're a little bit more factual and a bit more of like a general overview, of the history. So this would be including like the history, the conquerors, the emperors, the location, the borders, you know, what things look like, possibly clothing, culture. It's just a basic overview. And having something like this, even if you're not using it with your students, I think it's really important for a teacher to familiarize herself with the general history of an area that you're going to be discussing, just so that you have a little bit more context for what you're going to be teaching. This is something at this point that I would be assigning to my student to read on her own. But again, if I had younger children and the time, and I had the time allotted to do this would be another thing that I would be reading aloud. So I have 2 books, the Discover Ancient Persia and Ancient Persia, and both of them are really similar. Sometimes I choose ones that are even young for, like, say 3rd to 4th grade, because they include maybe some more pictures, or the text is larger and you're getting just a great overview. This, for me, both of these books seem more like upper elementary and middle school age. And this one honestly doesn't look quite as engaging just because of the format. So I think I would prefer this one just for the way that it's laid out, but I did want to show both of these books. Okay, I think that is everything that I have so far for our Ancient Persia unit. I hope that these resources are helpful to you. If you'd like to see how we are applying these resources to our homeschool, you can see how we homeschool on a daily basis by following me on Instagram at Pepper and Pine.